You're listening to
Catholic Sprouts,
the daily podcast for Catholic kids that strives to plant seeds of faith. Hey there, Sprouts. Today is Wednesday, December 12th, 2018. It is also a great feast day today that I want to encourage you to celebrate. Today is the feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe. It is an especially important feast day here in the Americas. We celebrate today when Mary, our beloved mother, came to a poor peasant in Mexico, a man named Juan Diego. And through some simple conversations, she was able to convince the bishop and then almost all of South America that she was their beloved mother and that they should come home to the Catholic Church. So please celebrate Our Lady of Guadalupe today, wear some vibrant colors, have some Mexican food, dance to make her happy. But we are going to move on today in the Catholic Sprouts podcast with the Jesse tree. This week we are talking about Moses. We've talked about how the Israelite nation was enslaved in Egypt, how God chose Moses, an Israelite who was raised as an Egyptian prince, to come and lead them to freedom, and how God appeared to Moses in the burning bush at the top of Mount Sinai and revealed that his name was Yahweh, or I am. Today we are going to talk about what happened when God sent Moses to Egypt. Now, as you can imagine, it was no simple task to free the Israelite nation. They were a huge, thousands upon thousands of a nation of people, and they were a good workforce for the Pharaoh, and he didn't have to pay them anything. So losing his slaves would have been really terrible. He did not want to do that. So Moses had a big task in front of him. Plus, when he returned to Egypt, he was returning to the people that once thought of him as family. Don't you think they would think Moses was ridiculous to come back dressed as a shepherd, claiming to be doing the work of the Israelite God? But Moses did not let these things stop him. Together with the help of his brother Aaron, Moses and Aaron went before Pharaoh and told him that God demanded that the Israelite people go free. Pharaoh, of course, doubted that their God was anything special. So to prove that God was a mighty and powerful God, God sent plagues upon the nation of Egypt. Some memorable, interesting, horrible plagues. First of all, through Aaron, God changed all the water in Egypt, including the Great Nile River, into blood. Other plagues included plagues of frogs, where they climbed out of the Nile and covered everything. Lice, bugs that lived in your hair and on the animals. Flies that would bite you and spread diseases. Other plagues included boils, infectious little pockets on people where they would grow and be totally awful. Also, God sent hail that once it hit the ground would turn to fire. He also sent bugs called locusts that would come and consume all of the plants and crops in Egypt. He also sent 3 days of darkness upon the land. Now, as you can imagine, these were some pretty memorable plagues that hit Egypt, and yet Pharaoh's heart was hardened. Why was his heart so hardened? Why couldn't he believe, after maybe even one plague, after the Nile was turned to blood, why wouldn't he believe that he is contending with a God and that he should just let the Israelites go? Well, the reason why Pharaoh did not believe is because Pharaoh thought that he was a god as well. This time in Egypt, the pharaohs were worshipped as living gods. They were surrounded by people that made them believe there was something very important and very powerful. So Pharaoh thought that he was simply fighting a god as powerful, or maybe not even quite as powerful as he was. And after all these plagues, he was stubborn, and he believed that he was still more powerful than God. However, it took one final plague to convince Pharaoh, and that was the final plague that they call the Passover. We're going to be talking about that tomorrow. But for today, here is your challenge, friends. I would like you to think about what it means to have a hardened heart. When we see all of God's miraculous work around us, we can often be like Pharaoh. We can often make excuses for it or explain it away and not recognize that God is there doing mighty work. So I just want you to reflect on that. Are there things God is doing that I'm ignoring, like Pharaoh did? Is my heart hard and closed off to God like Pharaoh's? And if it is, what can I do to soften it and to see God at work more clearly? That's it for Catholic Sprouts today. We'll be back tomorrow, but until then, continue to grow in your faith and truly sprout into the beautiful creation that God intended you to be. One final word to the grown-ups. Thank you so much for listening to the Catholic Sprouts podcast. I would like to invite you to join a special Facebook group just for those that listen to the Catholic Sprouts podcast. We will use this group to connect, to share resources around that week's theme, and simply celebrate raising future saints. To find the direct link to the Facebook group, simply check the notes for this podcast episode.